When did you realize you'd made a huge mistake trusting someone? Ryan had seemed so nice at the bar. Then I went home with him and noticed that every room in his house was locked from the outside. He noticed me staring at the padlocks and laughed, saying his roommate's ex had a sleepwalking problem and kept wandering into their rooms at night, so they installed them as precaution and never took them down. Then he took my coat and hung it in a closet that had at least 15 identical black jackets. Oh yeah, he said. Weird, right? My roommate Chris has the same coat in every size because he keeps losing and gaining weight. That made enough sense that I followed him to the kitchen, where he opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. The kitchen was immaculate, not just clean but sterile, like a showroom, and I noticed the knife block had one missing. Where's your roommate tonight? I asked, taking the wine. Visiting family upstate, he said, leading me to the living room. Won't be back until Monday. The living room looked normal except for the windows, which had blackout curtains nailed into the wall, not hung on rods but actually nailed, and behind them I could see bars. Ryan saw me looking and said, "Break-ins. This neighborhood used to be really rough." I was started to get freaked out, but I convinced myself I was paranoid. I hadn't gone home with a guy in a while, and I didn't want to mess it up because I was being stupid. We sat on the couch and he turned on Netflix, scrolling through horror movies, which felt like a weird choice for a third date. I suggested a comedy, but he said horror movies helped him relax, something about controlled fear being cathartic. 20 minutes into the movie, I asked for the bathroom and he pointed down the hallway. Second door on the right. Don't use the first one, the toilet's broken. But when I walked past the first door, I could hear water running inside. Not dripping, but running, like someone had left a faucet on full blast. I tried the handle out of curiosity, but it was locked from the outside, one of those slide bolts he'd said was for sleepwalking. The bathroom I was supposed to use had a normal lock on the inside, but also another slide bolt on the outside, painted over like it had been there a long time. The medicine cabinet was open and completely empty except for a single bottle of bleach. When I came back out, Ryan was standing in the hallway, not near the bathroom but by the first door, and for a second his expression was completely blank before he smiled. "Find it okay?" he asked, putting his hand on my lower back to guide me to the living room. "Yeah, but I think you left water running in the other bathroom." His hand tightened slightly. "That's just the pipes. Old building." We went back to watching the movie, but I couldn't focus because I kept noticing things. There were scratches on the inside of the front door, deep ones, like someone had clawed at it. The carpet had a large stain that furniture had been rearranged to cover. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, like copper pennies. "I should probably go," I said. "Early morning tomorrow." "But it's only 10, Ryan said, not moving from between me and the door. "Besides, I already told Chris he could have the car tonight, so I can't drive you home. I can call an Uber. In this neighborhood, they'll cancel once they see the address." He refilled my wine glass even though I hadn't asked. "Just relax. I'll drive you home first thing in the morning." I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal, which was weird because I'd had full bars outside. Ryan noticed and said, "Yeah, these old buildings have terrible reception. The walls are lined with some kind of metal from the 70s. He went back to the kitchen and I quickly tried the front door. Locked with a key from the inside, one of those double-cylinder deadbolts. The windows were worse up close, not just barred but screwed shut, paint sealing them like they hadn't been opened in years. "Looking for something?" Ryan asked from right behind me. I jumped. "Just admiring the vintage windows." "They are beautiful," he said, but he was looking at me, not the windows. "Original glass from 1925, the year they caught that serial killer who lived in this building. Fun fact." My blood went cold. "In this building?" "This unit, actually. He kept women in the bedrooms. That's why the landlord never took down those exterior locks. Historical preservation or something." He smiled like this was normal information to share. I laughed nervously and said I really needed to go, that my roommate was expecting me. Ryan's smile faded. "You said you lived alone," he said. He was right. I had said that over coffee, when he'd asked about my living situation. I tried to backtrack, but he stepped closer, and I could smell that copper scent stronger now, coming from him. "Let me show you something cool," he said, taking my hand with a grip that wasn't quite painful but definitely wasn't letting go. Chris collected something interesting in his room. I had no idea how to get away from him. He led me to one of the locked bedrooms and slid the bolt open. The room was empty except for photographs covering every wall. Women's faces, dozens of them, all taken from far away like through windows or across streets. In the center of the wall was a photo of me, leaving my gym last week. I stepped back from the wall and my heart was beating, so loud I could hear it in my head. And Ryan was still in the doorway with his body blocking the only way out, and his face had gone completely blank like a mask had dropped. He reached for my arm and I jerked away fast, stumbling backward until my shoulders hit the wall of photos, and I felt them crinkle and bend under my weight. Ryan moved forward and his hand shot out and closed around my wrist, squeezing hard enough that I made a small sound I didn't mean to make. And he pulled me away from the wall toward the door while he was saying something about how I wasn't supposed to see that room yet. I tried to twist my wrist free, but his fingers just dug in harder, and I could feel each one pressing into my skin, and I realized he was way stronger than he looked, even though he wasn't a big guy. He dragged me out into the hallway, and I was looking around crazy fast for anything I could grab or use to hit him with. But the whole house was so clean and empty, like a showroom with nothing sitting out anywhere. I grabbed the doorframe with my other hand and pushed my feet into the carpet, trying to stop him from pulling me. And for just a second, his grip loosened a tiny bit, and I almost got my wrist free. Ryan yanked me forward really hard, and I lost my balance and fell down onto my knees on the living room carpet. And he was standing over me now with his hands on his hips, looking down at me like a parent looks at a kid who did something wrong. He said this was exactly why he usually waited longer before he showed them Chris's collection, and the way his voice went flat when he said the word them made me feel like ice water was running through my body. I pushed myself backward on the carpet toward the front door, even though I knew it was locked from. When I tried it before, and Ryan just stood there watching me with his head tilted to one side like I was a bug he was studying. My back hit the door, and I reached up behind me and grabbed the handle and pulled and twisted it as hard as I could, but it didn't move at all, and I could feel the deadbolt holding solid. Ryan walked toward me really slowly and got down on his knees so his face was level with mine, and he was close enough now that I could smell that copper penny smell coming off his clothes stronger than before. He told me in this really calm voice that the keys to the front door were upstairs in his bedroom safe, and even if I somehow got the keys, the neighbors around here were used to hearing sounds from this house, so screaming wouldn't help me. My purse was still sitting on the couch where I'd left it with my phone inside, and I pushed off the door and lunged toward it, trying to grab it before Ryan could stop me. His hand caught my ankle and pulled me backward across the carpet, and my chin hit the floor. But I kicked back with my other foot as hard as I could and felt it connect with his jaw. He let go and said a curse word, and I crawled fast toward the couch on my hands and knees. I grabbed my purse and turned it upside down, and everything fell out onto the carpet in a pile. And I was digging through the mess looking for my phone when Ryan got up faster than I thought he would and came over and picked it up before I could reach it. He held the phone up and showed me the screen was totally black and dead-looking. And then he explained he had some kind of cell signal jammer built into the walls, and even if I got outside, the closest neighbor was a quarter-mile away through the woods. Ryan put my phone in his pocket and told me to sit down on the couch, and his voice was still weirdly calm, like we were just having a normal talk about normal things. I stayed on the floor instead with my back pressed against the front of the couch, and he made this sighing sound like I was being annoying before he walked over and sat down in the armchair across from me. He started talking about how he understood I was scared right now, but this whole thing was really just a big misunderstanding, and he said Chris was actually the one who had the problem, and Ryan was just trying to help him deal with it. The lies were so obvious it would have been funny if I wasn't sitting there shaking and trying not to cry. But I made myself nod like maybe I believed him while my brain was going a million miles an hour trying to think of any possible way to get out of this house. Ryan leaned back in the armchair and started explaining how Chris was actually a really talented photographer working on this whole series about urban isolation and modern disconnection. He said the photos on the wall were all part of the project, and Chris just took candid shots of people in their daily lives to capture authentic human emotion. I nodded slowly and tried to make my face look confused instead of completely horrified, because I could tell Ryan was watching every tiny reaction I had. He kept talking about how Chris had these episodes sometimes where he got really confused and sometimes violent, which was why they needed the locks on the outside of the doors for everyone's safety. The whole explanation was so obviously fake that it made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to look like maybe I was starting to understand instead of planning how to get away from him. I made my voice shake a little and asked what about the water running in that locked bathroom, because that seemed weird even with everything else he was saying. Ryan's face went totally blank for just a second before he smiled again and said, "Oh, that was just because the pipes were really old and broken, and if you didn't keep a faucet running in there, the whole bathroom would flood." I nodded like this made total sense, even though it was the stupidest lie I'd ever heard, and I could feel my hands shaking where they were pressed against the carpet. Ryan stood up suddenly and asked if I wanted more wine, and I said yes, even though I didn't want to drink anything he gave me, because I needed him out of the room for even a few seconds. He walked to the kitchen, and I heard cabinet doors opening, and I jumped up and ran to the nearest window. I grabbed the edge of the blackout curtain and tried to pull it away from the wall, but the nails were driven in so deep that the fabric just tore in my hands. Behind the curtain, the bars were thick metal bolted directly into the brick on the outside, and I could see they were the professional kind that would need serious tools to cut through. Ryan came back carrying 2 wine glasses, and I took mine, and my hands were shaking badly enough that some of it sloshed over the rim. He sat back down in the armchair and just watched me for a long minute before asking if I felt better now that we'd talked through the whole misunderstanding. I forced myself to say yes, and even brought the glass up to my lips and took the tiniest sip possible, while my brain was screaming at me not to drink anything he gave me. I put the glass down on the coffee table and told him I was really tired and asked if maybe I could lie down somewhere for a little while. Ryan smiled this big friendly smile and said, of course I could sleep in his room where I'd be most comfortable. The way he said his room with extra emphasis made my whole body go cold, but I smiled back and said thank you because I didn't know what else to do. He stood up and gestured for me to follow him upstairs, and I did because there was no other choice. I counted 13 steps going up and noticed the third one from the top creaked really loud when I stepped on it. The hallway upstairs had 4 doors, and I tried to memorize which ones were which and where they led. His bedroom was the last door on the right, and it had a regular lock on the inside of the door handle. But mounted on the outside of the door frame was another one of those slide bolts like all the other doors had. Ryan pushed the door open and stepped back and gestured for me to go in first with this weird, polite smile like he was showing me a hotel room. I walked in, and my eyes went immediately to the window, which had the same setup as downstairs with bars and blackout curtains nailed into the frame. The bed was made neatly with dark blue sheets, and I could see the edge of something leather sticking out from under one of the pillows. A big, heavy dresser was pushed up against what looked like it might be a closet door, and there was a desk and chair in the corner. I turned around, and Ryan was standing in the doorway with that blank expression again, and he said I should get comfortable and he'd be downstairs finishing up some cleaning. Before I could say anything, he stepped back and pulled the door closed, and I heard the slide bolt click into place from the outside. I ran to the door and tried the handle, but it was locked solid, and I pressed my ear against it and could hear his footsteps going back down the stairs. I went straight to the window and started trying to pry the nails out of the curtain with my fingernails. The nails were driven in so deep that I couldn't get any grip on them, and I just kept tearing my fingernails, and after a few minutes, my fingertips were bleeding. I gave up on the curtains and looked at the bars behind the glass, and they were the heavy-duty security kind that were bolted through the brick exterior and would need power tools to remove. I started searching the room frantically and pulled back the pillows on the bed and found leather restraints with heavy metal buckles attached to the bed frame. The leather was worn and creased in places like it had been used a lot, and tightened and loosened many times. I opened the dresser drawers, and they were mostly empty except for men's clothes in the bottom 2 drawers. I tried to push the dresser away from the closet to see what was behind it, but it was way too heavy for me to move by myself, and it barely budged even when I put my whole body weight into shoving it. I give up on the dresser and press my ear against the bedroom door instead. Downstairs, I can hear Ryan moving around, water running in the kitchen and cabinet doors opening and closing like he's doing normal evening cleanup. My brain keeps trying to remember everything I've ever heard on true crime podcasts about surviving captivity. The advice always sounds so simple when you're listening safe in your car, but now my thoughts are spinning too fast, and I have to force myself to slow down and think strategically instead of just panicking. I scan the room again looking for anything I missed, and my eyes land on an air vent near the ceiling, the kind with metal slats you can see through. It's way too small to crawl through, but maybe sound carries through the duct system to other parts of the house. I drag the desk chair across the carpet as quietly as possible and climb up on it, gripping the wall for balance. When I press my ear close to the vent, I can hear that running water sound much clearer now, and underneath it there's something else. A soft sound that might be whimpering, or might be my imagination turning pipe noises into something worse. I listen for a full minute and the sound comes again. Definitely not pipes, and I feel my legs go weak on the chair. I climb down carefully and sit on the edge of the bed because I need to accept some hard facts right now. I'm not getting out of this house tonight, and I need to survive until I can find a real opportunity to escape. The thought makes me want to scream and tear at the door until my hands are bloody, but I bite down on my lip hard enough to taste copper and force myself to focus on staying calm and alert. Around midnight, I hear footsteps coming up the stairs and the slide bolt clicking open. I'm still sitting exactly where I was on the edge of the bed, because I don't know what else to do or where else to go. Ryan opens the door and looks pleased when he sees me being compliant and cooperative. He asks if I need anything, and I force myself to say no thank you in a small voice that doesn't sound like mine. He seems to take this as a good sign and comes into the room, sitting down on the bed next to me, close enough that our legs are almost touching. He starts talking about how he knew from the moment he saw me at the bar that I was special, that I had this quality the other women didn't have. I'm nodding along and trying to look flattered instead of sick while my mind screams at me to run. He reaches out and touches my hair, running his fingers through it slowly, and I don't pull away even though every muscle in my body wants to. I'm too terrified of what he'll do if I make him angry right now when we're alone and the door is closed. Ryan seems to take my stillness as encouragement and keeps touching my hair while he talks. He says Chris is going to be so excited to meet me, that I'm exactly the type Chris likes to photograph for his collection. The way he talks about Chris makes it clear that Chris isn't just some excuse or made-up roommate. Chris is real, and he might be even worse than Ryan, and I'm going to have to deal with both of them. Ryan finally stands up around 2 in the morning and tells me to get some sleep. He leaves, and I hear the bolt slide into place from the outside, and I wait until his footsteps fade down the hallway before I let myself cry. I cry as quietly as possible with my face pressed into the pillow so he won't hear me, and then I force myself to stop and start thinking clearly about Sunday morning. People are going to notice I'm missing, and someone will start looking for me. I didn't tell anyone I was going home with Ryan, which was stupid, but I did tell my coworker Jessica I was going to that specific bar on Maple Street. My car is parked outside this house somewhere on the street, and when I don't show up for brunch tomorrow morning, my best friend Allie will definitely start calling me. The problem is my phone is downstairs with Ryan, and even if someone tracks the signal to this address, he could just say I left hours ago and took an Uber home. I need to create some kind of evidence that I'm still trapped inside this house right now, something that can't be explained away or hidden if police eventually come searching. I turn on the desk lamp and start examining every single inch of the room, looking in corners and under furniture and inside drawers. Near the floor behind the desk, I find a heating vent with a metal grate held in place by 4 screws at the corners. If I can get those screws loose enough to create a gap, I might be able to drop something small into the vent system where it would end up somewhere else in the house. Something with my name on it, or something people know I always wear. Some piece of evidence that proves I was here and trying to leave clues about where I was being kept. I slip my bracelet off my wrist, the silver one my grandmother gave me for my 16th birthday that I've worn every single day since. Everyone who knows me knows I never take this off, not for showers or sleep or anything, and if someone finds it, they'll know something is seriously wrong. I crawl over to the bed and examine the metal frame, looking for a sharp edge I can use to scratch into the silver. The corner where 2 pieces join has a rough seam, and I press the bracelet against it and start dragging the metal back and forth. It takes forever and makes almost no mark at first, just faint lines I can barely see in the lamplight. My hands are shaking so badly I keep losing my grip and having to start over, and the scratching sound seems impossibly loud in the quiet room. After what feels like an hour, I've managed to carve "help" into the metal deep enough that it won't wear off, and then I add my initials below it. I try to scratch the date, but I'm not even sure what day it is anymore, whether it's still Friday night or already Saturday morning, so I just make the letters as deep as I can and hope it's enough. The bracelet is scratched up and ugly now, but it's proof, real proof that I was here and trying to leave evidence. I turn my attention back to the heating vent and examine the screws holding the metal grate in place. They're old and painted over, but not stripped, which means if I can find something thin and strong enough, I might be able to turn them. I reach behind my back and unhook my bra through my shirt, then work it out through my sleeve without taking my shirt off in case Ryan comes back. I pull out the underwire and bend it until I have a straight piece of metal about 4 inches long. It's thin but surprisingly strong, and when I wedge the end into the screw head and twist, the screw actually moves a tiny bit. I work on the first screw for what feels like forever, twisting and twisting until my fingers cramp and the wire cuts into my palm. The screw loosens gradually, paint flaking off as it turns, and when it finally comes free, I almost cry with relief. The second screw is easier now that I know the technique and I get it loose enough to create a gap between the grate and the wall. I hold my bracelet over the opening and take a deep breath, then let it drop into the darkness. I hear it hit metal and tumble down through the ductwork, bouncing and clattering as it falls, and I press my ear to the vent hoping to hear where it lands. The sound fades into silence and I have no idea where it ended up, but at least it's somewhere in this house now, somewhere Ryan doesn't know about. I push the grate back into place and finger tighten the screws so it looks normal, then hide the underwire behind the dresser and put my bra back on. The sky outside is starting to get lighter through the gaps around the nailed curtains, which means I've been awake all night working on this plan. I'm so exhausted I can barely think straight, but I can't let myself sleep. Can't let Ryan catch me off guard. I sit on the edge of the bed and wait, listening to the house settle around me and that constant running water somewhere behind the walls. Ryan comes back around 8 in the morning and I hear the bolts slide open before the door swings wide. He's carrying a tray with toast and orange juice and a small vase with a single flower in it. Like this is a bed and breakfast and I'm a guest instead of a prisoner. He sets the tray on the desk and smiles at me, asking if I slept well, and I force myself to nod and say yes, even though my whole body is screaming at me to run. He sits in the desk chair and watches me eat, making small talk about the weather and his plans for the day, and the casual normalcy of it is somehow worse than the threats from last night. I realize as I'm choking down the toast that he's done this before, that he has a whole routine worked out for keeping women in this room. He's relaxed and comfortable, not worried at all that I might escape, or that anyone will come looking for me, and that confidence is more frightening than anything else. He mentions casually that Chris texted him this morning and is coming home tonight instead of Monday, something about finishing his work upstate early. The way Ryan's face lights up when he talks about Chris is disturbing, this mixture of excitement and nervousness like he's trying to impress someone. I ask what Chris is like, trying to keep my voice curious instead of scared, and Ryan leans forward eagerly to describe his roommate's artistic vision and dedication to his craft. He talks about Chris like he's some kind of genius, someone who sees beauty in things other people don't understand, and I realize Ryan genuinely admires whatever sick things Chris does to these women. After breakfast, Ryan finally lets me use the bathroom, walking me down the hallway with his hand on my shoulder like I might try to run. He opens the door to the same bathroom I used last night and waits outside while I go in, and I hear him slide the bolt closed behind me. I search the room frantically, opening the empty medicine cabinet and checking under the sink, and feeling along the window frame for any weakness. The room is completely empty except for the toilet, sink, and that bottle of bleach, and the window has the same thick bars and nailed curtains as every other window in this house. I try the bars anyway, pulling and pushing to see if any are loose, but they're solid and professionally installed. When I come out, Ryan is standing right there in the hallway, and he's holding a length of rope that makes my heart stop completely. He sees my face and laughs, saying it's not what I think, that he just has chores to do and can't keep locking and unlocking doors all day. He ties one end around my wrist, Not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that I can't slip out, and clips the other end to his belt loop with a carabiner. He explains apologetically that this way I can move around with him and he can keep an eye on me, like this is a reasonable solution to a normal problem. Being tethered to Ryan is so much worse than being locked in the room because I have to follow him everywhere, matching his pace and staying close enough that the rope doesn't pull. He acts like we're a couple doing normal Sunday chores together, humming while he tidies the kitchen and washes dishes from breakfast. He does laundry next, and I have to stand in the small laundry room with him while he sorts clothes, and that's when I see the women's clothes mixed in with his things. There are shirts in different sizes and styles, jeans that clearly belong to different people, underwear that makes me feel sick to look at. Ryan notices me staring and explains casually that Chris likes to keep souvenirs from his photography subjects, that sometimes the subjects leave things behind when they finish their sessions. The way he says finish makes it completely clear these women didn't leave voluntarily, didn't walk out of this house alive, and I feel my legs go weak under me. Ryan catches me when I stumble and helps me to the couch in the living room, bringing me water and acting concerned like he's not the reason I'm absolutely frozen with fear. I drink the water because my mouth is so dry I can barely swallow, and I try to figure out how many women he's talking about. I counted at least a dozen different items of clothing in that laundry basket, which means at least a dozen victims, at least a dozen families who don't know what happened to their daughters or sisters or mothers. Ryan sits next to me on the couch and keeps checking his phone, looking at the time and then at the front door like he's waiting for something. His excitement about Chris coming home is building all morning, this nervous energy that makes him fidget and smile to himself. Around 3 in the afternoon, he finally unties the rope from his belt and tells me to go upstairs and make myself presentable because Chris appreciates effort. The way he says it makes it clear that Chris has expectations, standards for how the women should look when he photographs them, and I feel my last bit of hope crumble into nothing. Ryan stands up and motions toward the stairs. I follow him up because there's no other choice, and he unlocks the bedroom door and pushes it open. The sundress is laid out on the bed, pale yellow with small flowers, and it looks like something a different person would wear. Ryan tells me to shower and put it on, then leaves and slides the bolt shut from outside. I pick up the dress and the fabric feels soft and worn, like it's been washed many times. Someone else wore this dress. Someone else stood in this room and put on these same clothes, and I don't know what happened to her after that. I carry the dress into the bathroom and turn on the shower, letting the water run while I check every surface for a way out. The window has the same bars and nails as the bedroom. The shower drain is tiny and covered with a metal grate that's screwed down tight. I try pulling on the grate, but it doesn't move at all. The walls are solid tile with no panels or vents except the small one near the ceiling. I get in the shower because I have to, and the hot water feels wrong against my skin, like I don't deserve to feel anything normal right now. I wash quickly and try to think of any possible plan, but my mind keeps going blank with fear. I dry off and put on the sundress, and it fits almost perfectly, which makes me feel worse. I look at myself in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. The dress makes me look younger, softer, more like a victim than I already am. I hear a car engine outside and then doors slamming. Male voices drift up from downstairs, 2 of them talking, and my heart starts beating so hard it hurts. One voice is Ryan's and the other must be Chris. I press my ear to the bedroom door and try to hear what they're saying, but I can only catch fragments. Ryan sounds excited and nervous at the same time. The bolt slides open and Ryan is standing there looking me up and down. He nods like I passed some kind of test and tells me Chris wants to meet me. His hand is shaking slightly when he takes my arm. We go down the stairs and I can smell something cooking, garlic and onions, weirdly domestic and normal. Chris is in the kitchen unpacking grocery bags onto the counter. He's tall and thin with wire glasses and brown hair going gray at the temples. He looks like a college professor or an accountant, completely ordinary. He turns around when we walk in and his whole face lights up with a huge smile. He tells Ryan he did an excellent job this time. Ryan's grip on my arm loosens and I can feel him relaxing next to me. Chris walks over and starts circling me slowly. I freeze in place and try to keep breathing. He's studying my face from different angles, tilting his head and making small humming sounds. He says something about my bone structure and the way the light hits my cheekbones. His voice is detached and clinical, like he's talking about a painting instead of a person. I understand with horrible clarity that he genuinely sees me as an art subject, not a human being. Ryan is watching Chris's face anxiously, and when Chris smiles again, Ryan's whole body relaxes. I get their dynamic now in a way that makes everything worse. Ryan finds the women and brings them here. Chris does whatever he does with them. Ryan craves Chris's approval like he needs it to survive. Chris is the one in charge, and Ryan is desperate to please him. They're both monsters, but in different ways that fit together perfectly. Chris asks Ryan if I've been cooperative. Ryan says mostly, but mentions I got scared when I saw the collection room. Chris laughs, and the sound is light and friendly, like we're all sharing a joke. He says they always get scared at first, but they learn to appreciate the artistic process. The way he says artistic process makes my skin crawl. Whatever he means by that, it's not about art. It's about control and pain and things I don't want to think about. Any tiny bit of hope I was holding on to crumbles completely. There's no talking my way out of this. There's no convincing them to let me go. They've done this before and they're going to do it again. Chris announces he wants to start shooting tonight while the light is still good. Ryan immediately heads toward one of the locked bedrooms, and I hear him unlocking the door and going inside. Furniture scrapes across the floor. Something heavy thuds against the wall. Metal clinks and I realize he's setting up equipment. I stand frozen in the kitchen with Chris and he's back to unpacking groceries like this is completely normal. He pulls out vegetables and puts them in the fridge. He arranges spices in the cabinet by height. My mind is screaming at me to run, but there's nowhere to go. The front door is locked. The windows are barred. Ryan is between me and any possible exit. I try desperately to think of anything I can do to stop what's about to happen, but I come up empty. Chris finishes with the groceries and washes his hands at the sink. He dries them carefully on a towel and then turns to me with that same gentle smile. He takes my hand and his skin is cold and dry. His grip soft but completely firm. He starts leading me toward the hallway and talks about his vision for this series. He says my features are perfect for what he has in mind. He talks about lighting and angles and composition. His voice is enthusiastic and warm like he's sharing good news. His hand doesn't hurt me at all, but I know I can't pull away. Fighting now will only make everything worse. I follow him down the hallway toward the room where Ryan is still setting things up. The door opens and I see professional photography lights on tall stands. A chair sits in the center of the room with leather straps attached to the arms and legs. Camera equipment on tripods is positioned at multiple angles around the chair. The walls are completely covered with photographs of other women. They're all sitting in that same chair. They all have the same look of pure terror on their faces. Some of the photos show bruises. Some show tears. Some show expressions of pain so intense I have to look away. I realize this is how Chris keeps them. Not as prisoners in locked rooms, but as images on his walls. These women are trophies, evidence, proof of whatever he did to them. I count at least 15 different faces, and I know with absolute certainty that none of these women walked out of this house alive. Chris turns from the wall of photos and points at the chair in the center of the room. He doesn't say anything, just makes this casual gesture like he's offering me a seat at a dinner party. I look at the doorway, but Ryan is standing there with his arms crossed, completely blocking the only exit. My legs feel weak, but I walk to the chair and sit down because I don't have any other choice. The leather is cold against my bare arms, and I can see the restraints hanging off the sides. Dark brown straps with metal buckles that look worn from use. Chris starts adjusting the photography lights and he's humming under his breath, this cheerful tune that makes everything worse. He moves around the room checking angles and fidgeting with camera settings, completely focused on his technical setup like I'm not even a person sitting here. He's treating me like a mannequin or a prop, just an object for his composition. And somehow that's worse than Ryan's personal obsession with me. At least Ryan sees me as a person he wants, but Chris just sees me as raw material for whatever sick art project he's creating. I watch him hum and adjust lights, and my brain is screaming that this is my last chance to do something, anything, before it's too late. Chris walks over to the chair and picks up the restraints, examining them with this focused expression like he's making sure they're in good condition. That's when I finally break. I shove up from the chair and run for the door, pushing past Ryan's arm and making it 2 steps into the hallway before Ryan catches me around the waist. Chris makes this annoyed sound behind me, not scared or angry but irritated, like I've disrupted his workflow and messed up his schedule. Ryan drags me backward and I'm fighting and clawing at his arms, but he's so much stronger than me. Chris grabs my legs and between the two of them they carry me back to the chair and I'm kicking and screaming, but it doesn't matter. They drop me into the chair hard enough that the impact knocks the air out of my lungs. Ryan immediately puts his hands on my shoulders and presses down with enough force that I can't get up, and Chris moves fast to secure the restraints. Ryan keeps me pinned in the chair while Chris works on buckling the leather straps around my wrists. I'm screaming and fighting and trying to pull my arms away, but Ryan's grip is too strong and Chris is efficient and practiced at this. The leather wraps around my left wrist and Chris pulls it tight, threading the strap through the buckle and yanking until it bites into my skin. I feel the metal prong click into place and then he moves to my right wrist. Same process, same tight pull that makes the leather dig in. I'm still screaming and Ryan tells me to calm down, but I can't. I won't, because once I'm strapped in completely, there's no getting free. Chris finishes my wrists and moves to my ankles, kneeling down and wrapping the straps around each leg just above my shoes. He buckles them with the same careful attention he gave the wrist restraints, checking each one twice to make sure it's secure. When he's done, he stands up and steps back, tilting his head to examine his work like he's looking at a sculpture. He tells Ryan I'm too flushed and agitated, that my face is too red and my expression is too wild for the photos he wants. Ryan asks what they should do, and Chris says they need to wait for me to calm down, maybe an hour or so until my face returns to a more neutral state. They walk out of the room and leave me strapped in the chair, and I hear them in the hallway just outside discussing their options. Chris says they could sedate me, but he prefers his subjects conscious and aware, that the eyes look different when someone is drugged. Ryan suggests just waiting, and Chris agrees, saying they have all night and there's no rush. Their voices fade as they move down the hallway toward the kitchen, casual conversation like they're discussing what to have for dinner. I start pulling against the restraints immediately, yanking my wrists and trying to slip my hands through the leather straps. The buckles don't budge, and the leather just cuts deeper into my skin with each pull. I can feel wetness on my wrists and realize I'm bleeding, the straps rubbing my skin raw. I try to rock the chair, throwing my weight side to side to tip it over, but it doesn't move at all. I look down and see bolts in the floor, thick metal bolts going through the chair legs into the floorboards. The chair is permanently mounted, and I'm not going anywhere. I keep pulling anyway because I can't just sit here, and the blood makes my wrists slippery, but not slippery enough to slide free. I hear a sound that makes my whole body freeze. Loud banging on the front door downstairs, hard enough that I can hear it clearly up here. Someone shouts and the words are muffled, but I catch police and open up, and I start screaming as loud as I can. I hear Ryan and Chris in the hallway, and their footsteps stop, neither of them moving or speaking for a few seconds. The banging gets louder and I scream again, screaming help and please, and I'm up here, screaming until my throat feels torn. I hear the front door crash open downstairs, wood splintering and heavy footsteps rushing in. Multiple voices shouting police commands, and I keep screaming so they know where to find me. Ryan and Chris must run because I hear scuffling and more shouting and then footsteps pounding up the stairs. I find out later that Pearl Fitzpatrick called 911. Ryan told me she lived a quarter-mile away, but she actually lives in the attached unit next door, close enough to hear through the walls when someone is really loud. She heard screaming all day, faint at first, but getting louder, and she finally got worried enough to call the police. She told the dispatcher she heard a woman screaming for help, and gave them the address, and the police took it seriously because this neighborhood has had problems before. Pearl's call saved my life, and I never even knew she existed until the police told me later. She heard my screaming during the restraint struggle when I was fighting Ryan and Chris, and that's what finally pushed her to pick up the phone. Officer Otis Wagner comes through the door first with 3 other officers behind him, and I see his face change the second he looks at the walls. He sees the photos of all those women, and he sees me strapped in the chair, and I watch him understand exactly what he's found. He yells for the other officers, and they spread through the house, and I hear them shouting clear and secure and get down on the ground. Within minutes, Ryan and Chris are both face down on the hallway floor in handcuffs, and I can see them through the doorway. Ryan is silent, but Chris is complaining about his cameras, asking the officers to be careful with his equipment. Officer Wagner comes over to me, and his hands are shaking as he unbuckles the restraints. He keeps saying, "I'm sorry, and you're safe now, and I'm so sorry." And I don't understand why he's apologizing when he just saved me. The second the last strap comes free, I collapse forward and he catches me, wrapping his uniform jacket around my shoulders. Officer Wagner helps me stand, but my legs won't hold me, and he ends up half carrying me down the stairs. Other officers are everywhere now, some with cameras photographing everything, some filling evidence bags with items from around the house. I see them taking down photos from the walls and bagging the restraints from the chair. One officer is on his radio calling for detectives and crime scene techs. Wagner gets me to the living room couch and sits me down, and another officer brings me water. I'm shaking so hard I can barely hold the cup. Wagner stays next to me and keeps talking in this calm voice, telling me I'm safe and help is coming and everything is going to be okay now. I hear officers shouting from upstairs and the word ambulance repeated several times. Wagner's radio crackles with urgent voices, and he tells me to stay there, that he'll be right back. He runs upstairs and I hear him say something about the locked bathroom. More shouting and the sound of a door being forced open, and then someone yells for multiple ambulances. I learn later that they found another woman in the bathroom with the running water, the one I heard through the vents. Her name is Joyce, and she's barely conscious, severely dehydrated from being locked in there for days. She was reported missing on Friday, 6 days ago, and her family has been searching everywhere for her. The police find her lying in the bathtub with the faucet running, too weak to even call out anymore. I realized the whimpering sounds I heard through the vents were her trying to get help, and I was so focused on my own survival that I didn't do anything about it. The guilt hits me hard and I start crying, thinking about how she was suffering just feet away while I was trying to save myself. The ambulance arrives and paramedics come in with stretchers and medical equipment. They take Joyce out first on a stretcher with an IV already in her arm, and I see her face as they carry her past. She looks gray and her eyes are closed, and I'm terrified she's going to die. Another paramedic comes over to me and starts checking my vital signs, looking at my wrists where the restraints cut into my skin. She wraps my wrists in gauze and helps me onto a stretcher even though I say I can walk. They wheel me outside and I see police cars everywhere, their lights flashing red and blue in the darkness. Neighbors are standing on their porches watching, and I wonder if any of them heard me screaming and just didn't care enough to call. The paramedic loads me into the ambulance and we drive to the hospital with the sirens on. At the emergency room, they take me to a private exam room, and a nurse comes in with a clipboard and camera. She's gentle and patient as she documents everything, photographing my wrists and asking questions about what happened. She gives me water and crackers and tells me I'm dehydrated but otherwise physically okay. Before she leaves, she squeezes my hand and tells me I'm the first one they've gotten out alive in time to testify, and I don't know if that makes me lucky or cursed. A woman in a dark suit comes into the room about an hour later and introduces herself as Detective Eleanor Hodges. She has a notebook and a recording device, and she asks if I'm okay to give a statement. I nod, and she sits down in the chair next to the bed and turns on the recorder. She asks me to start from the beginning and tell her everything that happened. I tell her about meeting Ryan at the bar and going home with him and all the weird things I noticed. I describe the locked rooms and the identical jackets and the barred windows and the wall of photographs. I tell her about being locked in the bedroom and hearing the woman in the bathroom through the vents. I explain how I took off my bracelet and carved my name into it and dropped it in the heating vent because I knew I needed to leave evidence. Detective Hodges writes everything down and asks questions about timing and specific details. She wants to know exactly where the vent was located, and I describe the bedroom layout as clearly as I can. She tells me they'll search for the bracelet and that it will be important evidence if they find it. She explains that Ryan and Chris are both in custody and being held without bail on multiple charges, including kidnapping and assault. She says the investigation is ongoing and they're searching the entire house for evidence. I ask about the woman in the bathroom and Detective Hodges' expression gets serious. She tells me the woman's name is Joyce and she's in intensive care, but her condition is stable. Joyce was reported missing 6 days ago and her family has been searching everywhere for her. The police found her in the bathtub barely conscious and severely dehydrated from being locked in there with no food. Detective Hodges says Joyce is getting treatment and her family is with her now. I start crying again because I heard Joyce through the vents and I didn't do anything to help her. I was so focused on trying to save myself that I didn't think about who else might be trapped in that house. Detective Hodges tells me I did everything right and that staying alive was the most important thing. She says if I had tried to help Joyce, I probably would have gotten caught and then both of us would be dead. But I still feel terrible knowing she was suffering just feet away from me. Detective Hodges stays for another hour taking my statement, and then she gives me her card and tells me to call if I remember anything else. She promises they'll find my bracelet and she'll keep me updated on the investigation. The hospital keeps me overnight for observation, and the next morning they discharge me with instructions to follow up with my regular doctor. My best friend is waiting in the lobby when the nurse wheels me down. She runs over and hugs me so tight I can barely breathe, and she's crying and telling me she was so scared. She says she started calling hospitals yesterday, when I didn't show up for brunch and didn't answer my phone. She called every hospital in the city until she found me. We go out to her car and she drives me to my apartment. I realize my car is still parked outside Ryan's house and I tell her we need to get it. She says the police already called her about it and they're keeping it for a few days as part of the crime scene. She tells me not to worry about it and that she'll drive me anywhere I need to go. When we get to my apartment, I can barely make myself go inside because everything feels different now. My best friend stays with me and makes me tea and sits with me on the couch. She doesn't ask questions or try to make me talk about it. She just stays there and that's exactly what I need. 2 days later, Detective Hodges calls me and I can hear the tension in her voice. She tells me they found my bracelet in the vent system exactly where I said it would be. It had fallen down through the ductwork and ended up in the basement near the furnace. The engraving I carved into it is clear, and it proves I was trying to leave clues about being held there. She says it's crucial evidence that supports everything I told them in my statement. Then she pauses and tells me they found something else during the investigation. They searched the crawl space under the house and found human remains. 3 women buried in shallow graves under the floor. The forensic team is working to identify them, but it's clear they've been there for years. I drop the phone and run to the bathroom and throw up. I spend the next hour sitting on the bathroom floor throwing up until there's nothing left. My best friend finds me there and helps me back to bed. She calls Detective Hodges back and tells her I can't talk anymore right now. Over the next week, Detective Hodges calls several times with updates on the investigation. The forensic team has been processing evidence from Ryan's house, and what they're finding is worse than anyone imagined. Ryan and Chris have been doing this for at least 5 years. Ryan would meet women at bars or coffee shops and get them to trust him. Then he'd bring them to the house and lock them in the rooms. Chris would photograph them while they were restrained and scared. The photos were sold on dark websites to people who paid for custom torture content. The buyers would request specific poses or situations, and Chris would make the women do whatever was asked. Some of the women survived and were released after the buyers got bored. Others weren't so lucky. The 3 bodies in the crawl space have been identified as women who went missing between 2 and 4 years ago. Their families had been searching for them all this time. Detective Hodges tells me the scope of their crimes is still being uncovered. They found hundreds of photographs and videos on Chris's computer. They're working to identify all the victims and notify their families. I feel sick every time I think about how close I came to being one of those bodies in the crawl space. I start seeing a counselor named Dinah Navarro who works with people who survived violent crimes. My regular doctor recommended her and said she's one of the best. Dinah's office is small and comfortable with soft lighting and plants everywhere. She doesn't take notes during our sessions, and she doesn't treat me like I'm broken. In our first session, she asked me to tell her what happened, and I go through the whole story again. When I finish, she tells me that survival often requires doing things that feel wrong or shameful. She explains that fighting back isn't always the right choice, and that sometimes staying alive means being compliant and strategic. She says the fact that I stayed calm and looked for opportunities to escape shows incredible strength. She helps me understand that I made the right choices even when those choices meant doing things that felt like giving up. She tells me that freezing or complying during trauma isn't weakness. It's the brain's way of keeping you alive when fighting would get you killed. Over the next few weeks, Dinah helps me develop strategies for dealing with the nightmares and the panic attacks. She teaches me breathing exercises and grounding techniques. She helps me understand that healing isn't linear and that some days will be harder than others. Joyce is released from the hospital about 3 weeks after everything happened. Detective Hodges tells me Joyce wants to meet me if I'm ready. I'm nervous, but I agree, and we meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. Joyce is thin and pale, and she has dark circles under her eyes. We sit down across from each other, and for a minute we just look at each other. Then she reaches across the table and takes my hand, and we both start crying. We don't talk much because we don't need to. She understands what I went through because she went through it too. We sit there holding hands and crying together, and something about it feels healing. She tells me she heard me through the vents too, and she tried to call out, but she was too weak. She says knowing someone else was in the house gave her hope that maybe we'd both get out. We exchange numbers and promise to stay in touch. After that, we meet for coffee once a month and we talk about our therapy and our progress. Sometimes we don't talk about the house at all and we just talk about normal things like work and movies. Having someone who understands without needing explanation helps more than I expected. The trial preparation starts about 2 months after my escape and it takes over my life. The prosecutors need me to review evidence and give depositions and go over my testimony. Every session is hard because I have to look at photos of the house and read through statements and relive everything that happened. The prosecutors are kind but thorough and they need every detail to be perfect. Detective Hodges comes to every meeting and sits with me while we go through the evidence. She brings me water and tells me when we need to take breaks. Dinah helps me develop coping strategies for getting through the preparation sessions. She teaches me how to compartmentalize and how to separate the memories from my present reality. Slowly over the months, I start to feel like maybe I can actually get through this trial. The prosecutors explain that Ryan and Chris are both trying to take plea deals to avoid trial. But the district attorney refuses to accept any deals because the evidence is too strong, and the families of the 3 murdered women deserve to see justice in court. The prosecutors ask if I'm willing to testify, and I tell them yes. The thought scares me, but I know those other women deserve justice. Their families need to hear what happened and see Ryan and Chris held accountable. The trial starts 9 months after my escape, and it lasts 3 weeks. The courtroom is packed with families of the victims and reporters and people who just want to watch. I sit in the witness waiting room with Detective Hodges until it's my turn to testify. When they call me in, I walk to the witness stand and put my hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth. The prosecutor asks me questions for hours, and I describe everything that happened in that house. I tell them about the locked rooms and the photographs and being restrained in the chair. I describe dropping my bracelet in the vent and hearing Joyce through the walls. The prosecutor shows me photos of the house and evidence bags with my bracelet, and I identify everything. Then Ryan's lawyer gets to cross-examine me, and he tries to suggest I went to the house willingly and changed my mind later. He asks why I didn't leave earlier and why I didn't fight back harder. He implies that maybe I wanted to be there and only claimed it was kidnapping after things didn't work out the way I wanted. I feel my face get hot and my hands start shaking, but I force myself to stay calm. The prosecutor objects and the judge tells the lawyer to move on. Then the prosecutor brings out the physical evidence, including my bracelet with my name carved into it, and the photos from the vent system showing where it was found. The evidence proves I was imprisoned and actively trying to escape. The prosecutor shows the jury photos of my wrists from the restraints and medical records documenting my injuries. Ryan's lawyer tries a few more questions, but the evidence is too strong, and eventually he sits down. I testify for 2 full days, and by the end I'm exhausted. But I feel like I did everything I could for those other women. The verdict comes 3 weeks after I finish testifying, and I sit in the courtroom between Detective Hodges and my best friend, while the jury files back in. The judge asks if they've reached a verdict, and the 4-woman stands up and says guilty on all counts for both Ryan and Chris, and I feel something crack open in my chest that's been locked tight since that night. The judge sentences them each to life without parole, and Ryan turns around to look at me with that blank expression, and I stare right back until the bailiff makes him face forward. After the judge dismisses everyone, the families of the 3 murdered women come over to where I'm sitting, and one mother takes my hands and thanks me for being brave enough to testify, and I start crying, because I don't feel brave at all. Detective Hodges drives me home and tells me this is a good day, and I should let myself feel it, and I do feel something like relief mixed with exhaustion that goes bone deep. 6 months pass and I'm doing better than I expected, even though I still wake up gasping from nightmares about locked doors and running water. I can't go to bars anymore, and I have panic attacks in small rooms, but Dinah helps me understand that recovery isn't linear, and some scars don't heal completely. I started volunteering with an organization that helps survivors of violent crimes, and I lead a support group once a week where I share my story, and seeing other people realize they're not alone makes the nightmares slightly more bearable. Joyce and I meet for coffee once a month at a place with big windows and multiple exits, and we talk about therapy and our families, and sometimes we just sit quietly together because we both understand what the other survived. Some days I feel almost normal, and other days I check every lock 3 times and sleep with lights on. But I'm alive, and Joyce is alive, and that feels like enough of a victory. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, and I never second-guess fear anymore, and I tell every woman I meet to listen when something feels wrong, because being polite or nice might cost you everything, and being rude or paranoid might save your life.